Hi, welcome back to Cap at Home Live. I'm Miss Van. Today we are going to go over the part 2 of the object or the elements of art, shape, and space lesson that we started last Tuesday. So we did some work laying out all of the elements for our painting, and we discussed vanishing point, background, midground, and foreground. And we just laid out everything, and we did some three-dimensional work here. And today I'm going to show you some watercolor techniques. So here we go. All I'm using today is a piece of paper towel, watercolor paintbrush. I have a watercolor palette, and I have a cup of water to wash my brush. And I always make sure to use cold water because it is better for your brushes. So to get started, since we are using watercolor, I'm going to get the whole page wet. So I'm just going to do section by section, and I'm going to start with everything that is going to be brown. So I've got my path, I've got my buildings, and I've got my trees. And in order to keep my people and my smaller objects from being like completely washed out, I am going to sort of place water around them so that they will stand out, and I will add the more detail objects last. So I've got a couple of different shades of brown here, and I'm just going to go lightly at first. I have to get my watercolor bits wet so that they will react with the brush. And I'm just going to fill in everything that I want to be brown. We discussed a few key words last time, and one that we were just starting to get to that I didn't really talk too much about was atmospheric perspective. So if you've ever looked at something that's like really, really far away off into the distance, you'll notice that it's slightly bluish or gray tinted. And that's because it's so far away that it's actually starting to reflect the color of the sky or the water, which is why it's sort of like blue or gray depending on how cloudy it is. So we're going to do a little bit of work with atmospheric perspective as well. So as I approach my vanishing point, the color is just going to get a little bit lighter. And as I said before, since I started my drawing kind of diagonally and it moves across the page instead of going like straight back, the closest point is here, and then the vanishing point is like at the diagonal. So this building is way further away than these buildings. So those buildings are going to be a little bit bolder. And I am sort of going around the spot here where I put my tree. That way, when I go in and add the green next, it will still pop up. But like, I want the green of the tree to stand out from the green of the grass, so I'll actually do the grass first, and I'll do like the leaves of the tree like later. But right now I'm working on these buildings, so I'm just kind of adding a little bit of water to each face of these buildings, just to kind of get the paper ready so that you can add color to it. And I'm going around the objects that aren't going to be green, or that are going to be green, because I'm doing the brown now. And I want to be very careful because I want my sky in the far background to stand out from the buildings. So I'm doing my best to sort of paint in the line so it stays sort of distinct. And I've got a few different shades of brown here, so I'm going to change it up a little bit. This sort of like golden brown. I've got kind of a tan. I've got sort of a reddish brown. And I've got this rich chocolatey brown. And then my palette did not come with a black shade of paint. So to get black, I'm going to mix brown and blue very lightly. So I'm going to go ahead and add the brown to the building tops because in my mind when I saw them they were like a sort of a black sort of slate color. So I'm going to use that shade to do the roof, but first I'm going to add a little bit of watercolor paint to make that happen. So there we have the initial sort of coloration of the buildings. I'm just going to kind of mix it up a little bit because they're all a little bit different. And just kind of layer. That's what I really like about painting, is that you can do a lot of different shading and layering. So you can choose what pigment shades that you want. So now I've got everything that's going to be brown in the background. Now I'm going to do the midground, which is mostly my trees. Ooh. So I added these little lamp posts last because they are actually my perspective cues. So like they start kind of bigger and then they get smaller the closer they get to the vanishing point. So that just helps me remember like how big to make things along the path, like so that they're visible in the distance. So I forgot and I did that over here, this tree. So I'm just kind of blocking it in a little bit, and I'm trying to be very careful so that the lamppost is still visible when I go to add the blue. And I'm going to do the blue last before I start doing the detail. And because this brush is relatively small, it's fortunate that everything's going to dry pretty quick, so I'm going to try and work at the speed that will kind of accommodate how everything dries. I've got one little tree left way back here, and I gave her lots of leaves. Alright. Now I'm going to start kind of getting the page ready to add green, and I'm going to do it section by section. So this section of the foreground right here, I'm going to do And I really like the fact that the pencil labeling is going to be visible, because this is going to be like kind of an instructive piece of artwork. And I noticed that I had some spots over here, but I'm getting away from the green. So I'm getting sort of this light green color down here, and I have to get my paint ready, so that has to be nice and saturated with water as I'm working. And I'm trying to minimize like the effect that happens when you accidentally paint over like a subject piece. So I'm like being really careful to go around the smaller items, except here there's some like plants and they're gonna pop out anyway from the grass behind them. But like the people, the animals, and like the trees that are a little bit more like they stand out, I'm gonna try and go around that. And when I get to this building, I'm gonna go around this building because I want that building to look like it's standing up in a three-dimensional aspect. And then I did add some hills to this image, so I'm going to try and make those pop out as much as I can by like adding a darker, bolder line of green here, just so that it looks like it's standing upright away from the page. Alright, so now I'm going to add in the green way far away in the distance. It's like so far away from the rest of the page, or the rest of the image. And that's really going to be like a much, much, much lighter shade when I'm done, because that is what atmospheric perspective looks like. And I did get a little bit more paint color here than I wanted, so that brings me to this technique. So there's like a special way that you can erase watercolor. So this is a piece of paper towel, and I'm just going to dab up some of that extra ink. And look at that. Look at that. So that is going to show off some of my atmospheric perspective right there, because it's going to be more of like a gray tint because it's so far off in the distance. And this is like a good middle green for the middle ground. Haha. And I'm going to sort of try to accentuate this hill right here. So I'm going to come back in and like, I'm going to have to dab some more ink away. But that is exactly the way I want it to look, so I guess it's fine. And now I'm going to sort of color in the negative space around this lamppost. So the lamppost in this instance right here is like the subject, and the grass is like the negative space, because I want the lamppost to appear that it's standing upright. And then I've got this part here that's part of the foreground, so I'm going to try and make that nice and bold. And then right here in front of these really cool boulders that I have some of my people sort of dancing on, I'm going to go around them. I'm going to go around this tree. I'm going to go around this tree. I'm going to go around sort of the head and shoulders of this figure right here. And now I'm going to add some more water to the page. And because there's paint on the page already, when you start to add water, the paint will kind of flow into the water. So that's why this drip right here, you can't see it, this drip right here is like pretty ominous, because if I put water too close to it, it'll bleed into the green, and I don't want that to happen. But I do like how this shading is sort of like darker at the bottom of the building, because that shows like the shadow. So I'm just gonna give that some space. And you can see very lightly that the green is actually following my paintbrush. But I'm going to add a little bit more because I want of the image, which is closer to the front of the page, to be a little bit bolder. And as I'm going, I can also use my paper towel to dab away extra liquid so that when I change colors, it's not too messy. Sometimes you're in opportunities where you get to work with other people and you want to keep your paint sets that you might be sharing nice and bright and bold and beautiful for your friends. This was like a day that I got to paint outside near the riverfront, and it was a beautiful day, and this image is gonna follow me for a little bit longer because it was such a nice day. And that's about all of the grass that I need to paint. Just gonna add a little bit more color to this spot right here. Oh, and I have to get between these two trees. You can see these trees are really close together, so I'm gonna get between them. And because it's like shady, that green is gonna be really dark. But I still want that lamppost to stand out. So I'm gonna go around it, and oh, it's okay. So here, I'm really close to the bottom of this tree, and some of that brown bled into where the grass is, but I am gonna keep it because that shows shadow, and that's what we're working with right now. So, now I'm gonna go through and add some more detail to the buildings. They have like windows and doors. I'm just gonna add little spots for the windows to be. And it's still pretty damp, so I'm going to add some detail to the path. It's like a nice sort of rocky path. And even though I didn't have like a whole lot of instruction, you can see how much time adding the color takes compared to like laying everything out, because you can get really detailed with the shading and the detail in every little aspect. So I'm going to let this kind of dry, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to the background a little bit so that the brown and the green paint has time to kind of dry into the page. So I'm going to make sure that my paintbrush is good and clean so that when I start to add the blue, it stays true to what I want it to look like. And then I can also use it to make that black shade that I was telling you about a little bit earlier. But we've gone over most of the technique that I wanted to cover. We've gone over foreground, midground, and background. Yesterday we went over different types of shapes when you're talking about art. So there's organic shapes, which are like the trees and the grass and the people. And then there's geometric shapes, which are like the buildings and the path and the lampposts. And okay, so now I've got the page ready to do the blue, and I want to make some clouds. So I'm not going to paint the whole sky like a flat blue. I'm going to kind of squiggle my brush around and leave some like empty space for the clouds to be. And I'm using the lighter of my blue options. And so this, there's a lighthouse in my painting, and I couldn't see the water, like the river, from where I was sitting when I set this image up. But I know it's there, so I'm going to add it anyway, because I can. And that's what you can do when you paint your own artwork, is you can kind of edit and show what you want to like identify. So here's some water. I have these like really fun blue and blue-green colors. So here's my water. Alright, so I'm going to let that be, and I'm going to work on the tree leaves. And I'm letting that be kind of an abstract detail. And this is going to bleed a little bit, but that's okay, because you can kind of see the building through the leaves of the tree. And this one is going to be much darker because it's closer to the viewpoint. The first time I realized you could erase watercolor paint with a piece of paper towel, I was like pretty psyched. Because then all of a sudden my paintings got that much more detailed. And I'm actually going to move some of this color out of the way so I can add that green. Yeah, that looks pretty awesome. All right. So I hope you liked my tutorial. If you do a landscape painting, I would very much like to see a comment on this video with your image work. And I'm going to make these nice and black, sort of slate colored. So I'm going to use the darker shade of blue. Darker shade of brown. I'm going to get a nice slate gray. You can also find our videos on YouTube. And I'm going to post that link when I'm done with this video so that you can share this with some of your friends that prefer to use YouTube. I know sometimes I like YouTube. Alright, just about finished with the background. I'm going to add some color to this lighthouse. And I'm going to add the light on the lighthouse too. So I've got this nice bright yellow. And even though it's daytime, I'm going to make that lighthouse nice and bright. Add a red roof and a red door. Alright. So, thank you for joining us at Tap at Home. I'm going to spend some more time working on this image, and I will post it in the comment section for you to see later. I hope you like and follow our videos. We've got so many wonderful instructors and wonderful videos here at Tap at Home. We'll see you next time.